The wedding hall fell silent as Evan lifted a silver-wrapped box from the gift table. I watched from my hidden spot near the kitchen doors, my heart pounding against my ribs. The label read from Thomas Reed in my careful handwriting. Madeline's head snapped up from her seat at the head table, her face draining of color. She'd made absolutely certain I wasn't on the guest list. Her mother, Paula, leaned forward, squinting at the box with sudden alarm. But it was too late. Evan was already tearing through the wrapping paper, smiling at the guests who'd gathered closer to see. Inside, nestled in white tissue, sat a sealed envelope, a USB drive, and a photograph. The photo showed a little girl with missing front teeth, sitting on her father's shoulders at the county fair. Madeline's hand flew to her mouth. The crowd murmured with confusion and curiosity. Evan pulled out the envelope, his smile fading as he read the front. The truth about your trust fund. Behind him, the massive projection screen flickered to life. My face appeared on it, recorded just 3 days earlier in my workshop. Paula stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Madeline's voice came out strangled and desperate. Turn it off. Please, someone just turn it off. My name is Thomas Reed, and I wasn't supposed to be here today. I wasn't supposed to see my only daughter get married, wasn't supposed to walk her down the aisle, wasn't even supposed to exist in her perfect wedding photos. 2 weeks ago, she made that crystal clear. But here I was anyway, standing in the shadows of the Crystal Springs Hotel ballroom, watching 300 guests celebrate a day I dreamed about since the moment she was born. The waiter who'd snuck me in, Marcus, had been my student years ago when I taught woodworking at the community center. He'd recognized me in the parking lot, seen the pain in my eyes, and whispered, "Back entrance, Mr. Reed. You raised half this town. You deserve to witness this." So I'd slipped in during the ceremony, positioned myself where the kitchen staff came and went, and watched my little girl become someone's wife. She looked beautiful in her mother's redesigned dress, the one Paula had stored away for decades. Every smile Madeline gave Evan felt like a knife twisting deeper. Not because I begrudged her happiness, but because I'd been erased from it entirely. I wasn't angry anymore, though. I was just done pretending that silence would fix what had been broken. The email had arrived on a Tuesday morning 2 weeks before the wedding. I'd been in my workshop, sanding down an antique chair for the Hendersons, when my phone buzzed. The subject line read simply, "Wedding Update." My hands had trembled as I opened it, somehow knowing before I read the words that something was wrong. "Dad, we've decided it's best if you don't attend the wedding. This day is about starting fresh, and your presence would make things awkward for everyone. Please respect our decision. No explanation beyond that. No phone call to soften the blow. Just a digital exile delivered in 3 cold sentences." I'd read it 5 times, then 10, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. At the bottom, I noticed my ex-wife Paula was copied on the email. Of course she was. This had her fingerprints all over it. I'd set down my phone and stared at the chair I'd been restoring, its broken leg now perfectly repaired and stronger than before. Some things could be fixed with patience and care. Others, apparently, were meant to stay broken. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept rereading that email, searching for warmth in words that had none. 3 days passed in suffocating silence. I'd left one voicemail for Madeline, keeping my voice steady even as my hands shook. "I raised you alone for 10 years, Maddie. I taught you to ride a bike, helped you with every school project, sat through every dance recital. I just want to see you happy. Please call me back." She never did. Instead, I got a text from Paula, "Stop harassing her. She's made her choice." Harassing her. One voicemail in 3 days was harassment now. I sat in my living room that evening, surrounded by photographs of Madeline at every age. Her first day of kindergarten, clutching my hand. Her 8th grade graduation, where she thanked me in her speech for being both parents. Her high school senior portrait, displayed on my mantle in a frame I'd built myself. When had I become the villain in our story? I held her graduation photo close, remembering how she'd hugged me that day and whispered, "I couldn't have done this without you, Dad." That girl seemed like a stranger now, replaced by someone who could cut me out of her life with 3 sentences. My phone buzzed again, making me jump. A text from an unknown number. My chest tightened as I opened it. The message was from Evan, Madeline's fiancé. "Mr. Reed, thank you for your understanding regarding the wedding arrangements. Madeline believes your presence would create uncomfortable tension with her mother and stepfather. We hope you can respect that this decision comes from a place of wanting peace on our special day." The words felt rehearsed, like someone had fed them to him. I could picture Paula standing over his shoulder, dictating every diplomatic phrase. Evan was a good kid, a pediatric nurse with kind eyes and a gentle manner. But he was marrying into a situation he didn't fully understand, and clearly, no one had bothered to tell him the truth. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on simple acknowledgement. "I understand. I wish you both happiness." What I wanted to say was, ask your bride about her trust fund. Ask who built it. Ask who stole from it. But that wasn't how I operated. I'd never been the type to blow things up without careful planning. That night, while organizing old financial documents for my taxes, a bang alert caught my attention. It was a notification about Madeline's trust account, the one I'd set up when she was born. I'd been listed as a secondary viewer since I'd funded it. The balance was far lower than it should have been. I pulled up the full transaction history on my laptop, my stomach nodding with each line I read. $83,000. Gone. Withdrawn over the past 2 years in chunks ranging from $5,000 to $15,000. Every withdrawal had been authorized by Paula as the account co-manager, a role she demanded during our divorce when Madeline was 12. Someone needs to oversee her future, she'd argued. I'd agreed, stupidly trusting that she'd protect our daughter's interests. The money had been intended for Madeline's education, maybe a house down payment someday. I'd worked double shifts at the furniture factory for years, socking away every spare dollar. My own father had died without leaving me anything, and I promised myself my daughter would have a foundation I never did. Now that foundation had been systematically dismantled, and the withdrawals all pointed in one direction. I pulled up my old files and found what I was looking for, business registration document for Apex Ventures LLC, listing Mark Sullivan as CEO and primary investor. Mark, Paula's new husband. The smooth-talking entrepreneur who always had a new scheme, a new opportunity, a new reason why this time would be different. I remembered something then, a conversation from 2 years ago that I tried to forget. It had been a Sunday afternoon when Paula called, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Thomas, I need to discuss an investment opportunity with you. Mark has a chance to get in on the ground floor of a revolutionary tech startup. We need capital, and I thought you might want to participate. I've been changing my truck's oil in my driveway. I'm not interested in Mark's business ventures, Paula." Her tone had shifted instantly to ice. "This isn't about Mark. It's about Madeline's future. This investment could triple in value. Don't you want what's best for your daughter? What's best for Madeline is keeping her trust fund intact and growing steadily." "God, you're so small-minded," she'd snapped. "This is why we divorced. You never had vision." I'd hung up, hands shaking with anger I'd refused to show. An hour later, Madeline had called, her voice tight with accusation. "Mom says you won't help us. That you'd rather hoard money than invest in our family's future. Maddie, that money is yours, not mine to invest in speculative. You're so selfish. You always have been." She'd hung up before I could respond. That was the first real crack between us, the moment when Paula's poison began taking root. Now, staring at the decimated trust account, I understood. Paula hadn't asked for my permission because she'd already had access to Madeline's money. And my daughter had no idea she'd been robbed. I did something pathetic that Thursday night. I drove past Paula's house on Elmwood Drive, a sprawling 2-story colonial that Mark's investment had supposedly purchased. The lights were on in the upstairs bedroom, and through the gauzy curtains, I could see movement. Then I saw her. Madeline stood in front of a full-length mirror, wearing her wedding dress. Paula and Mark flanked her, all 3 of them smiling and laughing about something I couldn't hear. My daughter looked radiant, spinning slightly so the dress flared out around her ankles. Paula adjusted the veil while Mark held up his phone, probably recording the moment. I sat in my truck across the street, engine off, watching the family tableau I was no longer part of. "You look beautiful, kiddo," I whispered to the empty cab. My eyes burned, but I didn't let myself cry. I'd done enough of that already. She looked happy in there, surrounded by the people who'd convinced her I was the problem. Maybe she was better off believing their version of events. Maybe the truth would only hurt her more. But as I watched Mark's arm drape casually around my daughter's shoulders, something hardened in my chest. No, she deserved to know what had been stolen from her, even if she hated me for revealing it. I started the engine and drove home with a new resolve forming. The next morning, I called the Crystal Springs Hotel to inquire about attending as a guest. "I'm the bride's father," I explained to the event coordinator. I seemed to have misplaced my invitation details. There was typing, then an uncomfortable pause. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reed, but I'm showing that you're specifically not on the guest list. In fact, there's a note here from Mrs. Sullivan requesting that you not be admitted to the venue under any circumstances." The words hit like a physical blow. Paula had gone so far as to blacklist me with hotel security. I thanked the coordinator and hung up, sitting in stunned silence in my kitchen. They hadn't just uninvited me. They'd taken active steps to ensure I couldn't show up even if I tried. That's when the idea began forming. If I couldn't attend as a guest, I wouldn't. But there was nothing stopping me from sending a gift. A very special gift. I walked to my workshop and began planning. On my workbench, I laid out everything I'd need: a nice gift box, silver wrapping paper, ribbon. But the contents would be far more valuable than anything money could buy. I'd give my daughter the truth, wrapped up with a bow, delivered at the moment it would matter most. They'd taken away my invitation, but they couldn't take away my right to give my daughter a wedding present. I spent the entire weekend assembling the perfect gift. First, I printed every transaction record from Madeline's trust account, highlighting each suspicious withdrawal in yellow. I organized them chronologically, showing the pattern clearly. Small amounts at first, testing the waters, then increasingly large sums as Mark's business ventures demanded more capital. I included the business registration for Apex Ventures, showing Mark as the primary beneficiary. I pulled up 3 different news articles about failed startups he'd been involved with, each one ending in investor losses and quiet settlements. Then I drafted a letter, revising it a dozen times until I got the tone right. Not angry, not accusatory, just factual, laying out what had happened and when. "Dear Madeline, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't tell you in person. The trust fund I built for your future has been systematically drained by your mother and stepfather. I've enclosed proof. This isn't revenge. This is me trying to protect you one last time, even if you hate me for it. Love always, Dad." I printed it on good stationery, signed it by hand, and sealed it in an envelope marked "Open First." But I needed something more, something that would make the impact undeniable and public. That's when I decided to record a video. I set up my phone on a tripod in my workshop Sunday evening, the space where I'd taught Madeline to use a hammer and saw when she was 8. The late afternoon light streamed through the windows, illuminating sawdust particles floating in the air. I pressed record and looked directly at the camera. "Maddie, if you're watching this, it means I didn't get to say goodbye properly." My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed through. "When you were 6, you asked me why I worked so much. I told you I was building something for your future. That something was your trust fund. Every extra shift, every weekend job, every dollar I could spare went into that account. $83,000 over 20 years. I held up the transaction records. This is what happened to that money. Your mother and Mark took it slowly, without your knowledge or consent. They used your future to fund failed businesses and their lifestyle." I paused, collecting myself. "I'm not telling you this to hurt you or ruin your wedding. I'm telling you because you deserve to know the truth about who's protecting you and who's been using you. I love you, kiddo. I always will." I stopped recording, saved the video to a USB drive, and placed it carefully in the gift box along with the letter and documents. This was it. My final attempt to reach my daughter. The morning of the wedding, I woke at 5 and couldn't fall back asleep. I showered, dressed in my good suit, the navy one I'd worn to my father's funeral, and drove to the Crystal Springs Hotel. The gift box sat wrapped on my passenger seat, silver paper catching the early morning light. I'd addressed it carefully to Evan, knowing that anything marked for Madeline would be screened by Paula. Hotel staff were already setting up when I arrived, arranging chairs and testing sound systems. I approached the service entrance and found a young coordinator with a clipboard. "Delivery for the groom," I said, handing her the box. "Should I leave this with you or take it to the gift table?" She glanced at it, then at her list. "Gift table is fine." Through those doors and to the left, I placed it carefully among the other presents, making sure it was visible but not suspiciously prominent. Then I left, driving to a diner across the street called Maggie's, where I could watch guests arrive from the window booth. I ordered coffee I didn't drink and toast I couldn't eat. At 11, the guests began flowing in, dressed in their formal best, laughing and embracing. I recognized some of them. Madeline's college friends, Paula's book club members, distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. None of them knew I was sitting 50 yards away, watching through glass. At noon, Marcus appeared at my booth. He was wearing a waiter's uniform, his name tag slightly crooked. Mr. Reed. I looked up surprised. Marcus? You're working the wedding? Yes, sir. And I saw you sitting here. He glanced toward the hotel. You should be there. I'm not invited. That's garbage. He set down his order pad. You taught me everything I know about craftsmanship. Half the furniture in my apartment is stuff you helped me build. You raised half this town, Mr. Reed, including your daughter. You deserve to see this. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of the seating chart. Kitchen entrance. Staff corridor. You can stand near the back. Security won't check there. I hesitated. Everything in me wanted to refuse to maintain my dignity by staying away. But Marcus was right. I'd raised her. I'd earned this. Thank you, I whispered. 20 minutes later, I was inside, positioned behind a decorative screen near the kitchen doors. From there, I had a clear view of the ceremony space. The string quartet began playing, and guests rose to their feet. Then I saw her. Madeline appeared at the back of the aisle, her arm linked through Mark's. My chest tightened. Mark was walking her down the aisle. The man who'd stolen her money was standing in my place. The ceremony began, and I forced myself to watch. Madeline and Evan stood facing each other, hands joined, speaking vows I could barely hear over the ringing in my ears. I promise to always be honest with you, Evan said. Madeline smiled, tears glistening on her cheeks. I promise to always trust you. Trust. The word echoed in my mind with bitter irony. How could she promise trust when she'd been lied to for years? When the people she trusted most had systematically robbed her? The officiant pronounced them married, and the crowd erupted in applause. I watched Madeline kiss her husband, watched them walk back down the aisle together while guests threw flower petals. My hands gripped the edge of the screen, knuckles white. This should have been joyful. This should have been a moment of pure happiness. Instead, it felt like watching my daughter celebrate on quicksand, unaware that the ground beneath her was about to collapse. The ceremony ended, and guests filtered toward the reception hall. I followed at a distance, keeping to the shadows, positioning myself where I could see the head table. Marcus brought me a glass of water without being asked. You okay, Mr. Reed? I nodded, not trusting my voice. The reception began with toasts and dinner. Then the MC, a friend of Evan's from nursing school, stood with a microphone. Now, let's open some special gifts. Evan rose from his seat, smiling broadly, and walked to the gift table. Paula leaned over to whisper something to Madeline, both of them laughing. My heart hammered as Evan's hand hovered over several boxes before landing on mine. The silver wrapping caught the light. He lifted it, reading the tag aloud. From Thomas Reed. The room's energy shifted instantly. Conversations died mid-sentence. Madeline's smile vanished, replaced by confusion and something that looked like panic. Paula stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Evan, wait. But Evan was already tearing through the paper, his expression curious. Your father sent a gift, he said to Madeline. That's really thoughtful. He opened the box and pulled out the envelope marked Open First. Behind him, the projection screen that had displayed their wedding photos suddenly flickered. I watched from my hiding spot as my face appeared on the screen, the video I'd recorded playing for 300 guests. My voice filled the room. Maddie, if you're watching this, it means I didn't get to say goodbye properly. Paula lunged toward the AV booth, but Marcus, bless him, had positioned himself there. He blocked her path with a polite smile and a tray of champagne glasses. Ma'am, please return to your seat. The crowd watched transfixed as my video explained everything. The trust fund. The missing money. Mark's failed businesses. Proof of every withdrawal. This is what happened to that money, my recorded voice said, holding up bank statements. Your mother and Mark took it slowly, without your knowledge or consent. They used your future to fund failed businesses and their lifestyle. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Evan stood frozen, holding the envelope, his face cycling through confusion, shock, and finally anger. He tore open the envelope and pulled out the transaction records, his eyes scanning the highlighted withdrawals. $83,000, he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Paula's face had gone pale, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Mark pushed back from his seat, face reddening. This is ridiculous. Thomas is a bitter ex-husband trying to ruin. These are bank records. Evan interrupted, holding them up. Official documents. Dates, amounts, authorizations, signatures. He looked at Paula, then at Mark. Is this true? Madeline remained seated, her hands covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The video continued playing behind them. I'm not telling you this to hurt you or ruin your wedding. I'm telling you because you deserve to know the truth about who's protecting you and who's been using you. Paula finally found her voice shrill and desperate. Turn it off. This is slander. I'll sue him for what? Someone called from the crowd. For telling the truth? The room descended into chaos. Guests were standing, talking over each other, some moving closer to the head table to see the documents Evan was holding. Others pulled out phones, filming the unraveling scene. Paula grabbed for the papers, but Evan pulled them away. Mrs. Sullivan, I need you to explain these withdrawals. Every single one is authorized by your signature. It was for investment, she stammered. For all of us, including Madeline. Did Madeline know? Evan's voice cut through her excuses. Did she authorize you to drain her trust fund for your husband's businesses? Silence. Paula's mouth worked soundlessly. Mark stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. I don't have to stand here and be accused. Then leave, Evan said coldly. But you'll be explaining this to lawyers soon enough. Mark's face purpled with rage. He grabbed Paula's arm and started pulling her toward the exit. Guests parted like water, staring at them with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Madeline hadn't moved. She sat frozen at the head table, mascara running down her cheeks, staring at the photo of herself as a child that had been in the gift box. The little girl on her father's shoulders at the county fair. The video ended with my voice saying softly, I love you, kiddo. I always will. Then the screen went dark. In the terrible silence that followed, Madeline stood on shaking legs and ran toward the exit. I slipped out through the kitchen entrance, following the path Marcus had shown me earlier. The evening air hit my face, cool and clean after the suffocating atmosphere inside. I heard footsteps behind me and turned. Madeline stood in the doorway, still in her wedding dress, her face streaked with tears and ruined makeup. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Why? She finally whispered. Why would you do this to me? I kept my distance, giving her space. I didn't do this to you, Maddie. They did. You ruined my wedding. Her voice broke. You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. I gave you the truth. Something you should have had years ago. The truth. She laughed bitterly. You've always hated that Mom found someone who treats her well, who has ambition. Ambition built on your stolen money. I pulled a copy of the bank records from my jacket. Look at them yourself. Every withdrawal. Every date. Where do you think that money went? She didn't take the papers. Mom said you were controlling, that you tried to keep her from succeeding. I tried to protect what I built for you. My voice stayed calm, even as my heart shattered. That trust fund was 20 years of overtime shifts and sacrificed weekends. It was your future. And they took it. Madeline's face crumpled. I don't know what to believe anymore. Then don't believe me. Check the records yourself. Call the bank. Ask Mark about his failed businesses. I started walking toward my truck. But ask yourself this. If I was lying, why would your mother and Mark run? The next morning, the story exploded. I woke to 17 missed calls and a voicemail from a local reporter asking for comment. Apparently, several wedding guests had posted videos online, and the story had spread through a small town like wildfire. Groom exposes theft at wedding reception, read one headline. Mother and stepfather under investigation for trust fund fraud, announced another. I ignored the calls and drove to my workshop. Work had always been my refuge, the place where broken things could be fixed with patience and skill. I spent the morning restoring a vintage dresser, letting the familiar motions calm my racing thoughts. Around noon, my lawyer called. Thomas, you need to know that the police have opened an investigation into the trust fund withdrawals. Several people at the wedding reported what they saw, and Evan filed a formal complaint this morning. Good, I said simply. There's more. Paula's accounts have been frozen, pending the investigation. Mark Sullivan has 3 outstanding warrants from previous business dealings. They found him trying to board a flight to Mexico this morning. I set down my sanding block. And Madeline, she's with Evan. From what I understand, she's been reviewing the bank records herself. I nodded, throat tight. Thanks for letting me know. That afternoon, I kept working, losing myself in the smell of wood stain and the satisfaction of restoration. Then I heard a knock on my workshop door. I looked up to find Madeline standing in the doorway. She was wearing jeans and one of her old college sweatshirts, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup covered the dark circles under her red, swollen eyes. In her hands, she clutched the photograph from the gift box. The little girl on her father's shoulders. Can I come in? Her voice was barely above a whisper. I gestured to the stool near my workbench. She sat slowly, looking around at the familiar space. I spent all night reading those bank statements. Every single transaction. I waited, giving her time. I called the bank this morning. They confirmed everything. The account balance, the withdrawals, Mom's authorization on every single one. Her voice cracked. $83,000. You worked so hard for that money. I worked hard for you, I corrected gently. She looked at the photo in her hands. I remember this day. The county fair. You won me that stuffed elephant at the ring toss. Took you 17 tries. 18, I said. But who's counting? A ghost of a smile flickered across her face, then disappeared. I said terrible things to you. I believed them when they said you were controlling, that you didn't want Mom to be happy, that you were jealous of Mark's success. She looked up, tears streaming freely. I let them turn me against you. You were lied to, Maddie. That's not your fault. I should have known better. I should have questioned. You trusted your mother. That's normal. That's what daughters do. Madeline's composure finally broke completely. She sobbed into her hands, shoulders shaking with the force of her grief. I moved closer and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You didn't deserve any of this, she choked out between sobs. You raised me alone. You put me through school. You gave up everything for me, and I repaid you by cutting you out of my life. I didn't tell her it was okay, because it wasn't. I didn't say I forgave her, because forgiveness needed time to grow, like the careful restoration of something broken. What I said was simply, you were lied to, Maddie. Being deceived isn't the same as being guilty. She looked up at me with devastated eyes. Can you ever forgive me? You're here, I said quietly. That's a start. We sat in silence for several minutes, the only sound the occasional sniff as she tried to compose herself. Finally, she spoke again. Evan wants to press charges. Civil and criminal. His lawyer says we have an airtight case. What do you want? She stared at the photo again. I want my mother to explain why she stole from her own daughter. I want Mark to pay for what he did. And I want. She paused, struggling with the words. I want to find a way back to being your daughter again. My throat tightened. You never stopped being my daughter. Even when you wanted nothing to do with me. She stood, and after a moment's hesitation, hugged me. I held my little girl, now a grown woman, and let her cry. When she finally pulled away, she said, I need to fix this. All of it. The next 3 weeks were a storm of legal proceedings and personal reckonings. Paula and Mark's marriage crumbled under the weight of criminal investigation. Mark was arrested on the old warrants plus new charges of financial fraud and embezzlement. Paula, facing her own legal troubles, hired an expensive lawyer who argued she'd been manipulated by her husband. The court didn't buy it. Her signatures authorized the withdrawals. Her accounts received the transfers. She'd known exactly what she was doing. Madeline moved out of Paula's house and back into a small apartment near the hospital where Evan worked. She sold the luxury car Mark had bought her, the designer bags, the expensive jewelry, discovering with each sale that most of it was purchased with her own stolen money. She tracked down every dollar she could and returned it to her trust account. The fund that should have held nearly $90,000 now held $62,000, with more being recovered as investigators traced Mark's hidden accounts. One Thursday afternoon, I received a letter at my workshop. It was addressed in Madeline's careful handwriting. I opened it standing at my workbench, afternoon light streaming through the windows. Dad, Evan and I have decided to start over. The wedding that happened wasn't the one we wanted, built on lies and stolen money. We're planning something small, something honest. Just family who actually care about us. It will be in our backyard, just 30 people in 3 weeks. We'd be honored if you would walk me down the aisle. Love, Maddie. I must have read that invitation 20 times, my eyes blurring each time I reached the words, walk me down the aisle. It was everything I'd wanted, everything I'd imagined since she was born. But could we really rebuild what had been broken? Could trust grow back after being cut down so completely? I called her that evening. I got your letter. And her voice carried hope and fear in equal measure. I'd be honored, I said. But Maddie, we have a long road ahead of us. This doesn't fix everything. I know. But it's a start, right? It's a start. I agreed. The 3 weeks passed quickly. I spent them building something special in my workshop, something Madeline didn't know about. On the morning of the ceremony, I woke early and put on my good suit, the same navy one I'd worn to the first wedding. This time felt different. No sick dread in my stomach, no watching from shadows. Just nervous anticipation of being present for my daughter's actual beginning. The ceremony was in Evan's parents' backyard, a modest ranch house with a beautiful garden. 30 chairs arranged in neat rows, all filled with people who'd shown up for the right reasons. No pretense, no performance, just love and commitment. Madeline appeared at the back of the yard wearing a simple white dress she'd chosen herself, paid for with her own money from her nursing job. She saw me waiting and smiled, her eyes already glistening. Ready? I asked, offering my arm. More than ready, she whispered. We walked slowly down the grass aisle together, and this time, my chest filled with joy instead of grief. Evan stood waiting, his face full of genuine love for my daughter. No stolen money had paid for this moment. No lies propped it up. When we reached the front, the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" "I do," I said clearly. "Her father." I placed her hand in Evan's and stepped back to my seat in the front row. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt. They wrote their own vows, and when Madeline spoke, she looked directly at Evan. "I promise to always be honest with you, to always question what seems wrong, and to always protect what we build together." Her eyes flickered to me briefly. Because I learned the hard way that trust without truth is just wishful thinking. Evan squeezed her hands. "I promise to always be your partner in truth, to stand beside you even when it's hard, and to love you through every challenge." They exchanged simple gold bands, kissed to enthusiastic applause, and walked back down the aisle as husband and wife. At the small reception afterward, Madeline pulled me aside. "I have something for you." She handed me a small wooden box. I opened it to find a compass inside, engraved with the words, "Thank you for always pointing me home." "I had it made," she said softly. "No matter how far I wandered, you never stopped showing me the way back." I pulled her into a hug, this time without grief or anger, just pure love. "You found your way back yourself, kiddo." I just kept the light on. That evening, after the celebration ended and guests departed, I returned to my workshop. The space felt different now, lighter somehow. I pulled out the project I'd been working on in secret, a hand-carved jewelry box made from cherry wood, with tiny inlaid details showing moments from Madeline's childhood. I'd finished it that morning, before the ceremony. Inside, I'd placed a letter. "Maddie, this box holds space for your future memories, the honest ones you'll build with Evan. Fill it with things that matter. Photos, ticket stubs, love notes, whatever reminds you of real joy. Some truths break before they heal, but when love is honest, it finds its way back. You found your way back. I'm proud of you. Love always, Dad." I'd give it to her tomorrow. Let her discover it on her own time. Tonight, I sat in my workshop with a cup of coffee, looking at the photograph she'd left behind. The little girl on my shoulders at the county fair, grinning with missing teeth and absolute trust. That trust had been broken, stolen, and weaponized against us both. But we'd found our way through the wreckage. On my workbench sat the silver gift box from the first wedding, now serving as a holder for my woodworking pencils. A reminder that sometimes the most destructive gifts are the ones that reveal uncomfortable truths. And sometimes those are exactly the gifts people need most. I raised my coffee mug toward the photo. "To new beginnings, kiddo. The honest kind." Outside, the sun set over my small workshop, painting everything in warm gold light. Some things I'd learned could be restored with patience, truth, and love. Even broken families. especially broken families.